Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now, did you know that on CEX you can buy lots of processors for just 10p, 0.10p. There is a catch: you have to pay a few quid postage, and the other catch is that they're all pretty terrible, but if you're looking for a really cheap CPU, then it may not be a bad idea to start there. But did you ever wonder which of the 10p CPUs was best or least worse? Well, I've bought all of them, and today we're going to talk about that, so let's get into it. Now, these CPUs range from Core i3s all the way down to Pentiums and Celerons, and they're all pretty old, as you may expect for this price, but I thought we'd assemble all of them into some sort of table just to give you an idea of context and talk about which you may want to think about and which you may want to avoid. Spoiler alert, you probably want to avoid most, if not all of them, but let's discuss. So the best way to test all of these was with Windows 7 to guarantee compatibility, even though everything coloured light red would be best suited to something even older like XP. None of our super cheap CPUs feature more than 2 cores, which isn't going to be a problem for legacy operating systems, but Windows 10, for example, will feel more sluggish the further down the list we go. None of these support Windows 11 natively, but the processors listed at positions 1 through 18 can run it with a bypass or by installing it on a different supported PC first and then moving the drive. 19 through 33 are based on the older Socket 775 platform, which spans 2004 to 2011, or in the case of our processors, 2005 to 2010. Note the respective Cinebench multi-scores I've given each chip, as well as the performance score I've assigned them based on this result. I've given the Celeron D336 -1 out of 100, just out of pure spite, as it generates more heat than it does computational power. It is truly abysmal and an horrific experience all round. I'd recommend absolutely any of the other processors above it in the light red section for a retro build, perhaps excluding the sub 2 GHz options. There are no AMD options at this price point on CEX, but cheap AMD chips will be getting their own video soon. So, are any of these Intel offerings actually worth it these days? Well, any of the processors with 4 threads are going to make everyday tasks feel acceptable, at least snappier than those that lack hyper-threading. Realistically though, if you had to pick one of these chips, I'd stick to the top 7. The Pentium G3258 is listed way near the top, at least in its overclocked state because of the Cinebench score, but it's only worth considering if you can run it overclocked. This used to be achievable on cheap H81 boards and still is with a bypass despite microcode updates. It feels a lot quicker with an overclock applied, but the 2 threads still let it down, and to be completely honest, it may be worth avoiding. To put it bluntly, our 10 pence is best spent on any of the top 3 CPUs and only the top 3. Even Windows 11 still feels somewhat usable with any of these, and 4th gen CPUs all feature the necessary instruction sets for starting modern games, not that they will be all that playable. That said, there is an upgrade path to, say, the i7 4770 or 4790, both of which will still offer surprising performance in some of the latest titles. So of course this is a 10p video, and sticking to the 10p i3s for now then, and with just 100 MHz between them, the 4130, 4150 and 4160 are going to basically perform the same. I'm using GTA Legacy as an example here, paired with a GTX 1080 Ti. Now this is a horrible match, but we're getting the most out of the i3s. The game is set to high with the detail slider options at 2 out of 10. There will be stutters and slowdown as expected, but I was still able to have some fun. Online, however, is out of the question, it's just too intensive. For some reason, the i3-4150, the middle chip, was the most problematic. Textures were missing, and the road decided to lose all collision. Now this did happen a little bit with the other two, but not to the extent that it happened with the 4150. And the faster I drove, the more of the world disappeared. The 2 physical cores, despite the 4 threads, are simply choking here. I also tried the aforementioned Pentium G3258, the dual-core chip that lacks hyper-threading. It took a while for the game to load everything here. We started off in Michael's house with just a door. This was after waiting about half an hour for the save game itself to load. We were stuck at a loading screen for about half an hour, and this was the same with the i3s as well. It didn't really matter that we had hyper-threading with the 4th gen i3 processors. Now interestingly, any loading that was actually done in-game wasn't really that slow. For example, spawning at the hospital after a grenade-related accident didn't take any longer than it normally would, but I think that's because of the extremely long loading times at the start. All of the assets required were basically already loaded in here. Now in terms of actual gameplay, it wasn't the worst experience I've had with GTA. There will be frequent drops, however, below 30 FPS. It doesn't really matter what graphics card we're using, it just wasn't consistent. And I think this will be the case with any game that you can get running on this processor, especially if you want to use a newer Windows operating system. It might be worth considering a lightweight Linux distro with this, as well as the i3s for the optimal experience in 2026. Either that, or you could just use an older OS, though you may experience some compatibility issues, let's say with Steam, for example. Now with the G3258 still in the PC, I tried Red Dead Redemption 1, which ran a lot better. It still had its issues, and although it's a fairly new game on PC, it's an older console release underneath. There weren't any significant texture problems this time around. I attempted a couple of multiplayer titles, Fortnite being one of them, but I kept getting network errors with the Pentium and the i3, as well as near infinite loading. The stress on the CPU seemed to affect the internet connection, which isn't ideal. You can't really do much with this or the 4th gen i3s in terms of playing online titles. And even if you do get into the games, then you may experience some problems, to say the least. But as I said, if you want one of these for 10p or about £3 after postage, then I'd stick to the i3 4160, 4150 or 4130, or perhaps expand your budget a little bit and see what they have to offer in the 25p, 50p or £1 range, because you may find that there are a lot more tempting options and more capable options listed on the site. But I wanted to stick to the 32 absolute cheapest CPUs currently in stock, and although I think we all got what we were expecting from this video, I hope you enjoyed it. Now, as I said earlier, I didn't mean to exclude AMD CPUs, it's just that we were focusing on this price point, and all the ones listed at 10p here in the UK did happen to be Intel processors, but we'll take a look at some super cheap AMD ones in another video to see how they compare as well, and talk about which of them may be worth purchasing. So thanks as always, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.